Wow, thank you, Pastor Kevin. What's up, MDT? What's up, MDT?
What's up?
Karibuni sana to today's service. I'm glad that you all came. I have to say that when I was told that I will be doing this sermon, I was really scared. And then I was told the name. It's called Outcast. I was even more scared. So today I come here, nikijua that God is with us, and if He's allowed me to do this, then He has surely something to speak to us. But then I was also encouraged by my clansmen. You see, many cow songs have to do with a tree. Even if you're singing about Selina, you'll say, Selina, mti, mzuri, something. Maybe it's because there are not many trees in Kao land or something like that. Even in the Christian circle, we'll sing about Mti wa Uzima, Volume 1, Mti wa Uzima, Volume 2, or Sakayo, Shuka chini ya mti. You know that story, eh? So Easter is good because, again, I'm here and I'm going to speak about, Christ hanging on that tree to save us. And so I'm happy that somehow it wove itself to who I am and who, the blood that flows in my vein. And so I stepped out to do the series today. We've been talking about stepping out in Mavuno downtown and in the greater Mavuno family. And we started in January by talking about stepping out in general. And we did a very nice sermon series led by Pastor Kevin. And then we went into Finders Keepers, which was basically stepping out in our relationships. How was that? That was awesome, right? And then so today I want to talk about stepping out, but stepping out when you're among many people. Stepping out when you're among many people. Now, one of the most heartwarming things that I've come to love and I've come to identify with is when people get together and rally around a certain cause. Something that adds value to society. Something that is good. Something that allows everyone to just be a better person. Any examples in our country? It's okay, you can shout them. A cause where people have just rallied together and they've done something good. Kenyans for Kenyans. By the way, in that campaign, we rose about 665 million. That's a lot of money. Kenyans for Kenya. Bring Zach back home. Hey, but guys helped. Westgate, we are one. We are one. All those were good causes. And last week, all Kenyans were behind the First Lady. She ran for us. And now we all feel fit. Because she ran for the country. That was good. That was good. I can't imagine what she felt like to go on her Twitter handle or whatever place and just see every Kenyan saying, good job. Good job. Yeah, so we all feel fit today. But then there's another side of being in a crowd. It's just the other side of being in a crowd. Like when you're in a crowd and the crowd is not adding value, what they're standing for, you don't believe. What they're doing is demeaning, it's demoralizing, it's hurting, it's, destroying some other people. What if you're in a crowd and it's clearly on the wrong, you're caught up in it, but you don't know what to do? For example, when you were in primary school, when you were coming from school, there was this mchongwano session. Mchongwano is not mchongwano unless there's a crowd. If there's no crowd, you're insulting the other person. But if there's a crowd, and you say, wase, mnona umse, that adds value. Yani, ata yung mchongwano, ata kama haiko, umse ni black, simuoni, people laugh, and it's good. Sindio? And mchongwano is not mchongwano unless there's a crowd. And that is, it's good if you are the one with good mchongwanos, like Victor over there. If you are the one with good mchongwano, it's good for you. But what about the other person? It's destroying them. It's hurting them. Do you see grown-up Kenyans walking? Nini mbaya? Niliambwa timini mfupi, nabebanga sumuni kama mabati. And aliambwa kitambo. But it's still hurting even today. What if you're in a matatu? And as you enter the matatu, the conductor raises the fare, and you want to speak, and you speak, you think everyone will follow you, and they keep quiet. You are there alone. You are there alone. Oh, how about in campus, we organized a reunion for our primary school guys. And a few guys of us, we met, we had a good time. But then the guys wanted to take the after party somewhere else. And it was a very expensive restaurant. And so I wanted to say, Mazei placed the expert, but I didn't want to look like that guy who, you didn't have the money. And so you keep quiet, kwa hoteli unakunywa soda unasema, sijisikii na kuku leo. But being in this crowd is hurting me. It's hurting me. It's hurting my pockets. So they are 25 tunanunua 80 bob. But anyway, uko campus by definition broke. So you're wondering, really? Being in the crowd was hurting me. But what is the issue? Why do people love being in the crowd? One, it's simple. It's easy. You don't have to ruffle feathers. You don't have to do anything to belong. You just be part of it. It's effortless. And it's trouble-free. Being in the crowd is also safe in terms of no one takes responsibility. If students hit someone's car, it's the students. It's not Kamau, Jaroge. No, it's the students. So no one is taking responsibility. And so it's trouble-free. And then, if you're in the crowd, you don't have to go against any people. You don't have to go against any establishment or principle, rules, because you're just with the people. And so going with the flow sometimes is good, but it comes with its own demerits. Now, it's hard. People don't just wake up and say, today I'm going to. It's not a conscious decision to go with the flow. Sindio? Do you ever wake up and say, Mazi, leo na feel kwenda na flow? Leo job mtazengenyana mse nasikia kwenda na flow? No. you just find yourself doing it. You are at work. People are accounting for the cab fare that you used. And, your friends write to 1,000 and you're thinking, we used 500. But because, we are at work, these are friends. You just also write to 1,000. It just happens on you. Or maybe you are at work and there's an all expenses paid international trip. You don't want to be that person who says, this is unprocedural, it's illegal, we can't do it. Everyone thinks it's a good idea. Everyone thinks we've worked the whole year, we need this. So you can't be the person who's going ahead to say that you can't do this one. Or maybe it's lunch hour and guys are discussing, work and masaibu ya kazi and people start saying about the boss and that lady, of course not downtownian because we did find us keepers, and why she's getting the promotions. You don't want to be the one who's saying maybe she's actually working hard than all of us because you're just going with the flow somehow. Or for campus students, degree in your community. And so for you don't want to be the one who's not helping people. You don't want to be sidelined because you're not working with the people to enhance the academic prowess of the campus community by just helping someone with the answers. In the public space, all you need to do is retweet so that you don't have to find the wrath of the Kenyans on Twitter. In relationships, it's easy to go with the flow. Everyone is getting it, so if you don't give me, I know someone who will. And so just go with the flow. You have principles, yes. But then there's a flow, there's a flood, and you are swept by it. In marriages, in salons, people are talking about their husbands. And so you add yours because it's funny, and you're all laughing, and then you come out of here and you expect your husband to say, your hair is good, and you are talking about him, Ladies, but it's easy. You're in the salon anyway. Stuff is happening. People are talking. And so you go with the flow. You didn't decide that I'm going to go with the flow. It just happened on you. In our spiritual lives, often, it's hard to say that, by the way, on Sunday I'm going to church. Because, you don't want to share how God has helped you. Because everyone around you is believing in faith and all that. But it's God who has helped you. When others are making fun of Christians, when others are mocking the church, when others are hating on the leaders, sometimes it's just easy to go with the flow than to seem to be the person who stands up for what is right. It's easy just to keep quiet. You all remember that? I don't know how many tweeted, but hey, I like this weekend that you're celebrating Easter. And it's the story of our faith. And the Easter is the culmination of the death and the resurrection event, at the cross. And I'd like us to reflect on this story because it has a lot to give us in our lives today about going with the flow or against it. I want to read from scripture from Luke chapter 23, verse 32 to 43. But before we read it, let me just give a background to it. At this time, Jesus has spent about 3 years with his disciples. He has walked with them. He has trained them. He has taught them. And then he's going into Jerusalem because he knows that he has to complete his mission. He's going to be crucified. And so as he's going, during that time, one of his disciples betrays him. The other 11 disappear when he's facing trial, when he's going before Pilate, when the high priest and all those other guys are, heaping the knee on him. And so he's there. At this time, we pick the story when he's at the cross, when he's been tortured, when he's been beaten, and when he's facing death in the most cruel way. And so I'll ask CJ to read for us, from Luke 23, verse 32 to 43.
2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they were crucified, along with the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and save us as well." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered, "I tell you the truth. Today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about the 6th hour, and darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. For the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out in a loud voice.
Thank you. As I look at this story, especially from the beginning of the chapter, I see many instances that I can relate to personally about people who went with the flow. To begin with, there's the chief priests and the theologians of the time. I mean, Jesus has come and he has brought a new thinking to the theology that they have, and he has ruffled feathers. And so these guys have a reputation to keep. They have an occupation, they have a reputation and occupation to keep. And so they easily go with the flow when Jesus is being, when Jesus is being beaten and all that. Why? Why? Because they have something to keep. So I can relate to the theologians and the priests at the time. I mean, this guy is he's basically saying that what we've been saying and what we've been doing is not good. So I better go with the flow, because if I go with them, if I go with the people, then they're most likely on my side. As you read the story, there's Herod and the soldiers. These people probably just lived a boring life. And so when Christ came onto the scene, it was something good. It was something to be cynical and sarcastic about. And so they beat the guy, they are hurling insults on him, and it was amusing to them. They went with the flow. And then there was Pilate. Pilate was the representation of Caesar in this area, in this geographical zone. And so for him, there was only one kingdom, the Roman kingdom. And so when Jesus comes and says he's the king of the Jews, the guy must have felt, what do you mean? There's only one kingdom, the Roman kingdom. And so probably reading the mood of the people, reading the mood of his masters or employers, he must have felt, let me just go with the flow on this one. And he authorized the crucifixion of Jesus. The soldiers, they divided his clothes, and they probably were not well paid, and so they were thinking, well, we'll benefit from his clothes. Let's go with the flow. What about the crowd? They condemned him to death. To be honest, I'm not sure why these guys went with the flow. I'm not sure why they were saying that. Because Jesus taught them, Jesus healed them. At one time, Jesus feeds them. And so, why are they going with the flow? Probably it's because of what psychologists call group thinking. That when they are together, people are thinking together as a group. Their collective thinking is not rational. And so probably they just go with the flow because people are shouting, crucify him, crucify him. And so, yeah, let's crucify him. And they're there, just going with the flow. The crowd and the soldiers stood watching him suffer. They were sarcastic, they were cynical, and in so many ways, I identify with them. After all, he is a man who was claiming that he was God. I mean, he's claiming that he's God, and he's suffering. You know, sometimes as we read the story, we see the end part of knowing, the resurrection and all that. But that point up to the cross before after he's nailed to it, I probably would have gone with the cross. With the flow. I've often wondered, what would it have looked like if it happened today? How would that story have looked like if it happened today? First of all, there are people, there's a hashtag, crucify the king, or something like that. Gross, another one down, imposter. And people are just tweeting on that. What would people in Eastlands have said? Mtogoyas. Kuna mseme mado, amepewa mbegu, na ni king wa Jews. What would I have said personally? What pictures would have been circulating on Facebook at that time? What would have been your response? But more importantly, what would be mine? It could easily just have gone with the flow. As I reflect on the crowd and on the different people, I see myself much in what they did. I see myself. But all in all, against the very intense pressure of going with the flow, I see one exception. Now, at the cross, there were 3 people. At that time, there were 3 people. There was Jesus, who was being crucified for our sins, and then there were 2 other men. Both were not good guys. They were thieves, and they were being crucified because of their own sin, they were facing the consequences of their sin. But I see the difference in the 2 guys. They made 2 different choices. The first thief, he decided, well, these people must be true. These people must be doing something good. Why? This guy is a king of Jews. He's not saving himself. And so probably just went ahead and said, save yourself and save us. Now, it's very sarcastic or cynical because he's facing the same judgment as the king as Jesus, but he's there. Tuko kimoja lakini uko pabaya. I don't understand that. They're together at the cross, but he's laughing at Jesus. It's just went with the flow. Probably he's just looking at the people, the way the people are talking, and he just said, let me just go with the flow on this one. But then today I want us to focus on the other guy, the other criminal. This guy looks at everyone. He hears everyone condemning. He hears everyone hating, everyone accusing, everyone mocking, being sarcastic, spitting, hitting, speaking against Jesus. But he stood out. He steps out. He steps out. Though nailed to the cross, he decided to make it count. And at that time, he called on to Jesus. That guy stands out for me because in spite of everything and everyone, he came out with a different perspective than what everyone else had. And there are 3 things that I want us to learn from him today. 3 things that I want us to learn from him today. When faced with the choice to go with the flow, the guy made 3 choices. Number 1, he chose to honor God. He chose to honor God. When everyone was mocking, condemning, this guy chose to honor God. Why? In verse 40 it says, but that criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God? He said, since you are under the same sentence as he. Now, when you are sentenced on the same case with God, God is probably right, and you're wrong. And so this guy looks at the other criminal and says, don't you fear God? Don't you fear him? We are sentenced on the same, we've received the same sentence as he. Stop doing that. Instead of going with the flow, he chose to honor God. From him, I learned that whenever tempted to go with the flow, then I need to reevaluate and ask myself, does this honor God? Does this honor God? Now, it's hard that when in the middle of a tweet, in the middle of people talking, in the middle of wase, and there's mchongo no, and it's all good, in the middle of talking about that neighbor or that co-worker, it's hard for me to stop and say, do I fear God? It's hard. But that's precisely the point. That's precisely the point. That you need to evaluate our thoughts. You need to stop. Especially when we realize that you're going the flow and ask ourselves, does this honor God? You see, God has some promises and gifts for those who honor him. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 9 says that, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. Every time I go with the flow, every time I do something or say something that honors God, when I'm in the crowd, I stand a chance of missing out on these things that God has promised for those who honor him. I stand a huge chance of missing out. And so every time you're tempted to go with the flow, just take a pause and ask, does this honor God? Does this honor God? Before you feel that balance sheet or that receipt, ask yourself, does this honor God? Number 2, humility. Now this criminal realizes or recognizes his own sin and shortcomings. He was real with himself. You know, let me say that it's hard for men, especially, to honor or to say, or recognize rather, that the consequences they are facing is because of their sin. Have you ever seen those ninis that they bring for committee, guys? Mtu anasema, mimi nilipatikana na makosa. It's like he was here, makosa was here, today walipatikana na makosa on that day. On that particular day, alipatikana tu nayo. It's hard for them to admit that, by the way, I'm in committee because of my own sin. I'm facing the consequences of my decisions. But for this guy, it was different. Here, what he says in verse 40, but the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you're under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for you are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. The guy evaluates himself. The guy looks at his decisions and then realizes that, by the way, I'm suffering because of what I've done. Sometimes, when we are ingilia in other people, when we are tweeting about other people, it puts us at a position of pride. And we talk about their moral failure, we talk about their corruption, we talk about the decisions they've made from a position of pride. We don't get there and see, hey, baby, what about me? What about me? If today your life was just opened up and people told tweet, what would they say? Now, I'm not saying don't point out on injustice. Don't point out on corruption. Of course, point out. But as you do that, do it from a position that honors God and from a position of humility. And so you are doing it not because I'm holier than thou. You are doing it to help the general fabric of the society. Put yourself not on a higher moral ground. But as Paul says in Romans 12, verse 3, that do not think of yourself more highly than you ought to, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment. Think of yourself with sober judgment. Before you go with the flow, before you ingilia that governor or that senator or president, before you say what they're doing wrong, think about yourself and the positions you have responsibility over. And the last one is hope. That guy honored God and he was humble. In the final words recorded to him, we see him aligning himself with God and asking for a relationship. When faced with a choice, he decided that he will align himself with God and seek relationship. When the other criminal was mocking, when the other people were saying bad things, he said, Jesus, remember me when you come to your kingdom. His physical body, of course, was in pain. His physical body was hung to the cross, probably had problem breathing. But at that point, he chose to seek for a relationship. How his heart must have leapt for joy as Jesus answered him back. The criminal chose to offend the other criminals. He chose to go against the crowd. He chose to seek an honest evaluation of himself. And realizing at that point what was important to him, he chose a relationship with Jesus. He knew he didn't deserve to live because he was a bad person. And we see him acknowledging that. But he reached out to God and asked for a chance in his kingdom. All that mattered to him at that moment was a lasting relationship with Jesus. I love the response that Jesus gives him, and it gives me hope. That's a very good ending to this Easter story. And he tells him, truly I tell you, today you'll be with me in paradise. Today. Not at the end of age, not tomorrow. Today, you'll be with me in paradise. Jesus gives hope of eternal life. And that's an amazing story. You know, sometimes you could be in the thick of it. You could be in the middle of a crime. We could be in the middle of an addiction. But that point when we pause and seek a relationship with Jesus, in that nick of time, he tells you, today, you will dine with me. Today, you'll dine with me. Think of yourself. What are the points you identify with this guy? What are some choices that you've done? But as you pause and you look at the sin that is in you, as you pause and look at the majesty that is Christ hung on that cross, if you seek a relationship with him, then he's ready. You see, God was listening. As people were mocking, God was listening. As people were condemning, God was listening. And when this guy spoke and asked for a relationship, God had that too. God had that too. And he invited him to have a relationship with him. God was listening. And God answers even today.